We are living in an age where things are getting scary out there. And we are in the midst of yet another political year with an election around the corner. And it's hard to know where things are going. No matter what I will say about this film, it's getting a little bit scary out there too.
God bless America.
Civil War is directed and written by Garland. Film stars Kirsten Dunst, Wagner Moura, Cailee Speany, Mckinley Henderson, Sonya, Mizuno, and Nick Offerman. According to IMDb's plot synopsis, a journey across a dystopian future America following a team of military-embedded journalists as they race against time to reach DC before rebel factions descend upon the White House. This was one of my most anticipated movies of the year, simply because of Garland, who brought us an excellent film in the case of Ex Machina, easily one of my favorite science fiction films to have come out in recent years. And the concept itself had me very intrigued because, as we all know, like I said, it's a very political world that we're living in, especially here in the US. So I was very curious to see what he would come up with when making this film. I also knew that this film would also kind of drew controversy with its premise, so I knew what I was getting myself into with this movie. I don't know if it matches the same level as controversy as something like the American Society of Magical Negroes, but this, I would say, I wouldn't be surprised if there was still controversy surrounding this movie. But I gotta say, having seen the film, I gotta be honest with you guys, I was a little bit underwhelmed with it. But there were still some parts I did really like. I'm not saying that to be like a super negative person with this movie because of the subject itself. I'm just saying that I did find myself a little bit disappointed with this movie because I was hoping for a lot more. But here are some of the positives that I found with the film. The performances are all stellar. Kirsten Dunst is terrific as Lee Smith, a renowned and hardened war photojournalist. Dunst plays Lee as an emotionless person due to her profession that makes her feel disconnected from everyone. You see that throughout the movie on her face, on how much she has been doing her profession for such a long time that it's affected her to the point of none of this really phases her that much because it's just another job for her. It's another gig for her to just take pictures of this historical event, but she has no emotion to it because she's used to it. She's used to the trauma. She's used to the carnage and chaos of everything. So for Kirsten Dunst to deliver that sort of deadpan kind of nature, and I know so many people could say that that's a turnoff, I think that works to the movie's credit because that is the point that it's trying to make about what it means to be a war photojournalist. You know, the detachment of things. You can't be attached to the cause or the conflict. You are just there to just take pictures so that it could be used for historical context. That is it. And they throw themselves on the line to get these pictures, but it is simply put that when you are in those moments, you don't think about what this all means. You are just there to just point, shoot, get the pictures, get out. And I think Kirsten Dunst does an amazing job with that. Wagner Moura is exciting as Joel, another journalist and Lee's colleague. Moura plays Joel as a reckless and easygoing person as he always wants to be in the middle of the action than most other journalists. And yeah, Wagner Moura does play this character as if like he just thinks that it's just awesome to be in the middle of a gunfight. He just wants to feel the energy and the excitement of it all. And he just really feels like this is what he truly lives for, is to be in the thick of it. And it was awesome to see Wagner Moura also be really well used in intense sequences in the movie that works really well to the film's benefit. But he just really plays a journalist that really cares about not just his job, but really he's doing it for the sake of he wants to be there in the moment. He wants to feel like he is alive in those horrific battle sequences. Cailee Speany is heartfelt as Jesse Collins, an aspiring young photojournalist who accompanies Lee and Joel. Speany plays Jesse as a curious and ambitious photographer who wants to follow in Lee's footsteps. Cailee Speany is an actress that I have seen since, believe it or not, Pacific Rim Uprising, but what I took note of her was in something like Bad Times at the El Royale. And I heard she was amazing in Priscilla. But here she really does play somebody who truly wants to be a journalist and is inspired by Lee's work and so many other photographers that she wants to contribute in some way. But throughout the film, you see how much she is in kind of contrast to Lee. It's almost like she is kind of portraying how young Lee was when she started her career. She started off as kind of being nervous and scared to be in the thick of it all. But, as the movie progresses, you start to see a change in her. And it works in contrast because of her dynamic with Kirsten Dunst and how well they play off of each other. Stephen McKinley Henderson as Sammy, a veteran journalist for the New York Times and Lee's mentor, is fantastic. Henderson plays Sammy as an experienced and insightful journalist who tries to be the voice of reasoning of them all. As the experienced journalist, he always tries to see what the conflict is from any sort of angle, but he also tries to see like the humanity of it all. He is that voice of reasoning in the group. He always tries to see the best case scenario and what is best for the group, but also best for their sanity's sake. All four of the performances work well together, making the audience care about them and understanding their motivations, which I really liked. I really liked seeing how they play off each other so well that they almost kind of feel like a family in a way. It feels like a family road trip in a dystopian apocalypse. But I also want to point a shout out to Jesse Plemons, who has a very scary scene and was truly terrifying. I'm so glad that he was involved because, man, oh man, his role in that movie is just terrifying to watch. The direction is sharp. Director Alex Garland had an eye of making the films mostly centered on the journalist, but also creating an epic war film by having these loud and large fights, making for a thrilling and terrifying experience. It's so amazing to see Alex Garland still being able to keep it centered on this group, but also showing the scale of this war and how it's afflicting the rest of the country. And I think he does a great job of having an ensembled cast of people to fill these areas, especially in those battle sequences. He fills them up pretty well, and he manages to keep it grounded and very level-headed. The cinematography is stunning. Cinematographer Rob Hardy creates both a personal and massive scale film that captures both the chaos and quiet moments together. Keeping it mostly on the journalist while capturing everything else is incredible. It's amazing to see how Rob Hardy was able to capture the same vision as Alex Garland's thought process with keeping it on the journalist, but really capturing the scope of this war. And there are some gorgeous shots, especially at nighttime, that I think is stunning. One in which where they're driving through an area where there's a lot of sparks and whatnot. Looks incredible. Really gorgeous shots throughout this movie. The production is amazing. This is A24's biggest budget film to date, because this budget is $50 million, and it shows due to the battle sequences and ensemble setups. The money was well worth it. Seeing how much A24 was so confident in this movie and was willing to give Alex Garland a chance to show off his vision of this movie is incredible to me. And sure, you could still say it's still low budget, but for A24, it's impressive that this looks as incredible as it can be, because I would have never expected A24 to cough up that much money into a project that's over maybe $20 or $30 million. The action sequences are intense. Seeing the small gunfights to the climactic battle makes for an immersive experience. They had me on the edge of my seat. And I truly say those battle sequences are deadly and scary and loud as shit. The way they capture those gunfights and keeping it grounded because of Rob Hardy's cinematography makes those action sequences feel very intense. Even smaller things, like there's a sequence where there's another journalist that's with Lee and Joel, and you have both Jesse and this other reporter switching between cars. And I know that's so stupid to say that that's an action sequence, but it's impressive that they were able to do that. It's incredible to see the amount of talent that goes into those sequences, especially those battle sequences, that makes it feel very true to its nature of what it's trying to be. The story is interesting. Following these journalists as they encounter parts of a war-torn America made for an intense and bleak film. Garland makes sure that the journalists are important. That was his intention with this movie, was that it is about the importance of the journalists. Their integrity and their jobs, how they are risking their careers as well as their life to give these stories. And seeing them come across stuff throughout this war-torn America was really scary, especially two sequences. One in which they come across early in the movie where there's a bunch of dead bodies that both Lee and Jesse come across, and you see Jesse's reaction to it all. And then, like I said, with Jesse Plemons and his interaction with them, that has to be one of the most intense sequences in a movie to date, or at least of this year, because the way in which that scene builds up and the way the actors are, especially Jesse Plemons, who's holding that scene down for the most part, it's nail-biting, and it makes you kind of curious of what the hell is going on with this guy and what his motivations are. But I was glad to at least see that the journalists are the integral part of this story, and their contribution to making sure that history is recorded, whether it be a photography or writing it down, lives on. The pacing and runtime is surprising. The film doesn't dilly-dally. It keeps on going. With a runtime of 1 hour and 49 minutes, this film flies by quick. I was surprised that this movie is under 2 hours. I thought this movie would be at or a little bit above 2 hours. No, it's under it, which is impressive to at least keep the film progressively going and not feeling like there is a moment that it slows down. It keeps on going, and I can appreciate when a movie has what it needs to say and can tell it at a fast pace, but not feel like it's rushing through everything. It feels like it is telling its story as it goes along. Though enjoyable, I was a bit let down by some of the issues I saw with this movie, very much so. So here are some of the negatives. The message, I think, for this movie, like the theme. The heart is in the right place for Alex Garland, but I just don't think it's enough. Though the film's message is about journalists, specifically war journalists, and its integrity, I am not denying that they should not be there, okay? I am not saying that there shouldn't be a talking point about the integrity of journalism and what it means to be a journalist. But I do think it begs the question that I feel like there needs to be more to this. The film really just doesn't take a stance on any issues that this country really does face. You know, this country is facing a lot of perils, a lot of issues, especially with this year being an election year, is very scary on some of the things that are going on, especially on the right side of things. And so for this movie to not take a stand and kind of just be like in the middle of it all and not willing to like actually truly say what it needs to say, I think that's a little bit disingenuous, because this movie should take a stance on something. When a show like Andor can take a stance on something, I think this movie can. Especially with the concept, I think it's very clear that it should take a stance on what it's trying to say, but it doesn't. It still tries to appease to both sides of things, and you shouldn't do that. In a world that we are seeing a lot of issues in, you need to take a stance on what you're trying to say, because as much as the journalism part is important, you need to say what you need to say that's affecting things. The music is off. Though the score is fine, the score throughout this movie is pretty good. The license-based music that just, to me, doesn't fit well with the movie. They stood out like a sore thumb. Like, the licensed music choices that they make in this movie is so bizarre, and it just doesn't come off as being like genuine. It kind of just feels like, look at how awesome this is. And as much as this is a war movie, I also think that this movie should take itself a little bit serious on what its issue is, and for the music to just kind of be like a little bit upbeat or like to like rock 'em anthem. I think it's so cool. Yeah, it doesn't fit with what the movie should be going for. I feel like these were licensed music that they had in mind, but I feel like they should have realized what movie they're making. And lastly, the film has unanswered questions. It never gives you an answer on how this conflict started, nor does it give you any insight into the political landscape of it all. Sometimes it's honestly okay to answer some questions that need to be addressed, because this movie does not tell you a lot of things. There is some points where you don't need everything, but if you're going to address an issue, especially with one that led to this big open scale war-torn America conflict, you need to actually address what the issue is, because not explaining it or like kind of vaguely explaining it isn't enough. It's not until you actually watch like interviews of Alex Garland that like it doesn't really help with what he's trying to set out and make by going even further. Like, I think there needs to be more answers to be answered than to just kind of be left to the interpretation, because this is a serious thing that he is talking about and just not explaining it all, especially how the conflict started, is a very bizarre choice to me. It's an enjoyable time, but it could have been more. Everything is there for the film to be fantastic, but it falls short for me. But the film delivers on epic scale nature, and that is the best I can say about this movie. Is if you are going for the experience of it all and the performances, technicality of it all, and maybe even the storytelling about the journalists themselves, it's there. If you are looking for even bigger things like the theming of it all and which message trying to be, it's good, but there needs to be more, especially in a world that we're living in. It needs to say a lot more than just doing the bare minimum. So I'm going to give Civil War a 7 out of 10. I think it is a good movie. I think it is an enjoyable film, but I do think that it could have been better, and I think it could have reached to a goal where it should say something. Especially this year, guys. We have to say something. Trying to appease both sides of it all is just not going to cut it. You have to say something because this shit is getting scary. Really, it is. Especially with this year being an election year, it's getting really terrifying out there. I will be doing my reviews for both Rebel Moon Part 1 and 2 soon. So yes, look forward to those reviews and other movie TV show reviews coming soon.